You're carving a pumpkin right now, aren't you? Orange, round, perfectly Instagram ready. But here's something that'll make your knife slip. Your ancestors weren't carving pumpkins. They were hollowing out turnips, hard, twisted, nightmarish turnips, and shoving burning coals inside to ward off the dead. And that's just the beginning. What you think you know about Halloween? It's a sanitized, commercialized shadow of rituals so dark, so psychologically manipulative, that they literally shaped how we process fear, community, and mortality. The soul cakes your great-great-grandmother baked weren't just treats. They were ransom payments to the dead. Every tradition you celebrate tonight has blood, terror, and survival coded into its DNA. Ready to see Halloween for what it really was? Before we go further, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment with the creepy historical topic you want us to uncover next. Your curiosity fuels this channel. Let's talk about what Halloween looked like before capitalism got its hands on it. We're going back to Celtic Ireland and Scotland somewhere around the 1600s to 1800s. Samhain, the festival marking the end of harvest and the beginning of winter, wasn't a party. It was a boundary. The Celts believed that on October 31st, the veil between the living and the dead became thin enough to tear. Spirits could cross over, and not the friendly kind. So what do you do when you believe ghosts, demons, and the souls of your angry dead relatives are wandering your village? You fight back with psychology. Enter the turnip lantern. Forget your cute pumpkins. Turnips are dense, fibrous, and take genuine effort to hollow out. Your hands would blister. The smell of burning turnip flesh mixed with coal smoke would fill your home. But that was the point. These weren't decorations. They were weapons of psychological warfare. Families would carve grotesque, demonic faces into these root vegetables. Eyes gouged deep, mouths twisted into screams or snarls. Then they'd place a burning coal or candle inside and set them in windows, doorways, or carry them through the streets. The flickering light created an uncanny valley effect. Shadows danced. Faces seemed to move. The whole village became a theater of living nightmares. Why did this work? Because the human brain is wired to recognize faces, especially threatening ones. It's called pareidolia, our tendency to see faces in random patterns. But when you engineer a face specifically to trigger fear, you're hacking the amygdala. That's the part of your brain responsible for processing threats. A carved turnip with hollow eyes and jagged teeth lit from within activates the same neural pathways as seeing a predator in the dark. Your ancestors knew this instinctively. They understood that to scare away the dead, you had to outscare them. But there's more to this. These lanterns weren't just about fear. They were community signals. If your neighbor had a turnip lantern in their window, it meant they were participating in the collective ritual. It created social cohesion through shared terror. You weren't alone in your fear. Everyone was performing the same protective magic. And if you didn't participate, well, that made you suspicious. Maybe even dangerous. Now, where did this whole idea of carving faces into vegetables come from? There's a legend, and like all good legends, it's a cautionary tale wrapped in supernatural horror. Meet Stingy Jack, an Irish blacksmith and con artist who supposedly tricked the devil. Twice. The story goes like this. Jack invites the devil to have a drink with him. But Jack doesn't want to pay, so he convinces the devil to turn himself into a coin. The devil does. Jack pockets the coin next to a silver cross, trapping the devil. Jack only releases him after the devil promises not to claim his soul for 10 years. A decade later, the devil returns. Jack tricks him again, this time convincing him to climb a tree to pick fruit. While the devil's up there, Jack carves a cross into the bark, trapping him. The devil, furious but outsmarted, promises never to claim Jack's soul. But here's the kicker. When Jack dies, heaven doesn't want him. He was a liar, a cheat, a manipulator, and hell can't take him either, because the devil keeps his word. So Jack is stuck, condemned to wander the earth forever in the dark. The devil, in a moment of twisted mercy, tosses Jack a burning coal from hell to light his way. Jack carves out a turnip, places the coal inside, and becomes Jack of the Lantern. Jack-o'-lantern. This story isn't just folklore. It's a psychological blueprint. It teaches you that cleverness without morality leads to eternal isolation, that there are consequences for manipulating even the cosmic order, and most importantly, it legitimizes the ritual. If Jack needed a lantern to navigate the darkness between worlds, then so do you. The myth gave people permission to engage in what might have seemed like superstitious nonsense. It created narrative scaffolding for the behavior. But let's get darker. Some historians suggest the Stingy Jack legend was actually a tool of social control. In rural Ireland and Scotland, resources were scarce. Community cooperation was survival. If you were known as a Stingy Jack, someone who hoarded, manipulated, or refused to contribute to the collective, you were a threat. The legend wasn't just about the devil. It was about what happens when you break the social contract. You end up alone, wandering in the dark, with nothing but a rotting vegetable and a dying ember. That's not supernatural punishment. That's social exile with a horror story coating. So how did we get from turnips to pumpkins? Immigration. Specifically, the Irish potato famine of the 1840s. Over 1 million Irish people fled to America, bringing their rituals with them. But here's the problem. Turnips weren't as common in the United States. What was common? Pumpkins. Big, orange, soft, easy-to-carve pumpkins. The switch wasn't just practical, it was symbolic. Pumpkins were native to North America. By adopting them, Irish immigrants were adapting their Old World rituals to New World resources. It was cultural evolution in real time. But something else happened in the translation. Pumpkins are friendlier. They're round, smooth, almost cartoonish. You can't really make a pumpkin look as nightmarish as a gnarled turnip. So the ritual softened. The fear diluted. What was once a genuine psychological defense mechanism became a harvest decoration. This is where American commercialization comes in. By the early 1900s, Halloween was being marketed as a children's holiday. The scary stuff was being repackaged as fun. Greeting card companies started selling Halloween cards. Costume manufacturers jumped in. And the jack-o'-lantern? It became a symbol of autumn, of nostalgia, of wholesome family fun. The original purpose, to terrify the dead, was completely forgotten. But here's what's interesting from a psychological perspective. Even though we've sanitized the ritual, we're still performing it. We're still carving faces. We're still lighting them from within. We're still placing them at thresholds, porches, doorsteps, windows. The behavior persists even though the belief system has collapsed. Why? Because rituals have a stickiness that transcends their original meaning. They become muscle memory for a culture. We carve pumpkins not because we fear the dead, but because our great-great-grandparents did, and their great-great-grandparents before them. That's the real horror of Halloween. Not that it's become commercialized, but that we're still obeying instructions written in the neural pathways of people who died centuries ago. We think we're making choices, but we're really just actors in a play that's been running for 1,000 years. The script has changed, the stage has changed, but the performance, it never stops. Let's shift from fear to something arguably more disturbing: commerce with the dead. While your ancestors were carving turnips to scare away spirits, they were also baking cakes to bribe them. Welcome to souling, a medieval practice that turned the afterlife into a marketplace and your dead relatives into customers who could never quite pay their tab. Here's how it worked. Between October 31st and November 2nd, spanning Halloween, All Saints' Day, and All Souls' Day, poor people, often children, would go door to door. They'd knock, sing a song, and receive soul cakes in exchange for promising to pray for the homeowner's dead relatives. These weren't just any cakes. They were small, round pastries marked with a cross, made with spices like nutmeg, cinnamon, and allspice. Each cake supposedly represented a soul being released from purgatory. Now stop and think about the psychology here. You're essentially paying strangers to pray for your loved ones. Not because prayer is inherently valuable, but because you believe there's a cosmic ledger. Your dead grandmother is trapped in purgatory, a waiting room between heaven and hell, and the only way to get her out is to accumulate enough prayers. The more soul cakes you give away, the more prayers you buy, the faster she gets to heaven. It's spiritual capitalism. supply, demand, and salvation. But who came up with this system? The Catholic Church, around the 10th century. See, the Church had a problem. People were terrified of death, but they were also sinning constantly. Lying, stealing, sleeping around, being generally human. The Church needed a way to keep people engaged, donating, and morally compliant even after death. Enter purgatory. Not quite hell, not quite heaven. A place where sins could be burned away if enough prayers were said on your behalf. Suddenly, death wasn't final. It was negotiable. Soul cakes became the currency of this negotiation. And here's the brilliant manipulation. The ritual didn't just benefit the dead. It reinforced class structures. The wealthy could afford to give away more cakes, which meant they could buy more prayers, which meant their dead relatives got out of purgatory faster. The poor, meanwhile, had to literally beg for their family members' salvation. It created a spiritual hierarchy that mirrored the economic one. Even in death, the rich had better options. This wasn't charity. It was a protection racket. Give me a cake, or your mother suffers longer in the flames. Of course, no one said it like that. It was wrapped in hymns, crosses, and the smell of baking spices. But the underlying message was clear. Salvation has a price, and you'd better pay up. Let's talk about why this worked so well. Why did people participate in souling for centuries, even though it was transparently transactional? Because guilt is one of the most powerful social technologies humans have ever invented, and the medieval church weaponized it at an industrial scale. Think about what you're feeling when a child shows up at your door, singing a song about your dead mother's soul burning in purgatory. You're experiencing a cocktail of emotions: fear that you're not doing enough, shame if you refuse, social pressure because your neighbors are watching, and a desperate hope that maybe this actually works. That's not an accident. Every element of the ritual is engineered to maximize compliance. The songs themselves were psychological triggers. They weren't aggressive or demanding. They were mournful, sweet, innocent sounding. Children singing about death disarms you. It's uncanny. It shouldn't be happening, but it is. And that cognitive dissonance makes you more likely to give. Plus, refusing a child feels cruel. You're not just denying them a cake. You're denying your own dead relatives relief from suffering. What kind of monster does that? This is classical conditioning. Over time, the annual ritual of souling trained people to associate the start of November with death, obligation, and the need to perform generosity. Even if you didn't fully believe in purgatory, the social cost of not participating was too high. Your neighbors would notice. They'd talk. You'd become the family that didn't care about the dead. In a tight-knit medieval village, that kind of reputation could be fatal. But there's another layer here. Souling created a dependency relationship. The poor needed the cakes for survival. November was the beginning of winter. Food was scarce. Souling was one of the few socially acceptable ways to beg. And the wealthy needed the poor to validate their piety. By giving soul cakes, they could publicly demonstrate their concern for the dead, their generosity, their worthiness of heaven. It was a symbiotic exchange where both parties were trapped in a system neither fully controlled. Some historians argue that souling was one of the earliest forms of institutionalized social welfare, a way to redistribute resources during harsh months while giving it a religious justification. Maybe that's true, but it's also true that it normalized the idea that survival should be contingent on performance. You don't just get food because you're hungry. You get food because you're willing to sing, to pray, to play your role in the spiritual economy. That's not welfare. That's a contract. And here's the really disturbing part. We're still doing this. Every time you buy a product to support a cause, every time you donate to prove you're a good person on social media, every time you perform generosity for an audience, you're engaging in the same transactional morality. Souling didn't disappear. It just put on different clothes. So what killed souling? The Protestant Reformation. In the 16th century, Martin Luther and other reformers looked at the Catholic Church's salvation marketplace and said, "This is corrupt." They rejected purgatory entirely. No middle ground between heaven and hell. No prayers for the dead. No soul cakes. Salvation became a direct relationship between you and God. No intermediaries, no transactions. For a while, this seemed like progress. But then something interesting happened. The ritual behavior persisted, even as the belief system crumbled. In Protestant England, Scotland, and eventually America, people kept going door to door on Halloween. But instead of soul cakes and prayers, it became trick-or-treating. The spiritual justification vanished, but the action remained. Children still knocked on doors, still received food, still performed a role. The only difference? No one was pretending it was about saving souls anymore. It was just tradition. This tells us something profound about human behavior. We don't need to believe in the original purpose of a ritual to keep performing it. The ritual itself becomes the purpose. Trick-or-treating feels right because it's what our parents did, and their parents before them. The meaning has been hollowed out, but the shell remains. We're ghosts of our ancestors, haunting the present with behaviors we no longer understand. But here's where it gets psychological. Even though we've removed the explicit religious framework, the underlying structure remains. Trick-or-treating is still transactional. You give candy, you receive social approval, and avoid the trick. It's still a performance of generosity for an audience. It's still about inclusion and exclusion. Who decorates their house, who participates, who belongs to the community. The economics have stayed the same. We've just stopped admitting that's what's happening. Some researchers suggest this is because humans are fundamentally transactional creatures. We're wired to track debts, favors, and social obligations. Reciprocity is coded into our neural architecture. Souling worked because it tapped into that wiring. And trick-or-treating works for the same reason. We're not celebrating Halloween. We're maintaining the social contracts that keep communities functional. The dead don't need our prayers anymore. But the living still need reasons to knock on each other's doors. So what's the real horror here? That our ancestors believed in purgatory? Or that we've replaced one form of coercion with another, and we're too distracted by candy and costumes to notice? Souling was honest about what it was, a transaction. Trick-or-treating pretends to be innocent fun while still enforcing the same social hierarchies, the same obligations, the same performance of community that might not actually exist. Your great-great-grandmother baked soul cakes because she believed her mother was burning. You buy candy because if you don't, the neighbors will judge you. Different belief systems. Same behavior, same fear. The only thing that's changed is what we're afraid of. We're not scared of purgatory anymore, we're scared of social exclusion, and honestly, that might be worse. So here we are. You've just learned that your Halloween traditions, the pumpkins, the candy, the costumes, are the domesticated descendants of rituals born from genuine terror and economic desperation. Your ancestors weren't having fun. They were performing survival. They carved turnips because they believed the dead were hunting them. They baked soul cakes because they thought their loved ones were literally burning in an afterlife waiting room. And only their prayers could buy them freedom. And what have we done with all that fear? We've turned it into a holiday. We've wrapped it in orange and black, put it in plastic bags, and convinced ourselves it's harmless nostalgia. But is it really? Because here's what hasn't changed. We're still performing rituals we don't fully understand. We're still carving faces into things and lighting them on fire. We're still going door to door, still exchanging goods, still creating hierarchies of who participates and who doesn't. The belief systems have collapsed, but the behaviors remain. That's not evolution. That's haunting. We're haunted by the fears of people who died centuries ago. Their solutions to problems we don't even have anymore are still running in the background of our culture, like old code in a computer program. Nobody knows why it's there. Nobody dares delete it. And every October we execute the program again. Maybe that's the real lesson of Halloween. It's not about ghosts or goblins or things that go bump in the night. It's about realizing that you are the ghost. You're repeating patterns carved into human behavior so long ago that their origins have become folklore. You think you're making choices. What costume to wear, what candy to buy, whether to carve a pumpkin. But you're not. You're responding to psychological and social pressures that were designed to control communities, manage fear, and enforce hierarchies. The architects of those pressures are long dead. but their architecture remains. So the next time you carve a pumpkin, ask yourself, who am I really doing this for? The next time you hand out candy to trick-or-treaters, ask yourself, what transaction am I performing? Because somewhere, buried beneath the commercialization and the sugar rush, there's still a turnip lantern burning. There's still a soul cake being baked. And there's still a community using fear and obligation to hold itself together. Halloween isn't a celebration of the past, it's proof that the past never ends. It just changes costumes. If this made you rethink everything you thought you knew about Halloween, good. That's the point. History isn't just dusty facts and dates. It's the operating system running beneath everything you do every day. And we're here to pull back the curtain. If you want more of this, more weird history, more dark psychology, more uncomfortable truths about the traditions you take for granted, subscribe to this channel. Seriously, hit that button, because we're just getting started. And here's what I want from you. Drop a comment right now telling me what historical topic you want us to investigate next. What tradition, what holiday, what everyday behavior do you suspect has a darker, stranger origin than you've been told? Your curiosity drives this channel. Your questions become our next video. Also, if you've made it this far, you're exactly the kind of person who should share this video with someone who thinks they know everything about Halloween. Send it to that friend who goes way too hard on their porch decorations. Send it to your family group chat. Watch them squirm. Thanks for watching. And remember, every time you carve a pumpkin, you're obeying instructions from the dead. Sweet dreams.